All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to be joined today by the American Red Cross CEO, Gail Mcgovern, as well as the National Weather Service Director, Ken Graham. They are going to be sharing some of their preparation and response activities and efforts that are underway right now to support Floridians as they are already experiencing the impacts from Hurricane Ian. And so I'm going to begin by providing a little bit of an update on FEMA's mission and some of the preparedness actions that individuals can take right now. So first, Hurricane Ian is and will continue to be a very dangerous and life-threatening storm. And this is going to be for the days ahead. Floridians up and down the coast are already feeling the storm's painful impacts, and we have yet to experience landfall. However, I spoke with my leadership team this morning, and I can confidently say that we have the right teams and we have the right resources in place and ready to meet the changes or the needs of those that we are charged to serve. But as with any storm, the most important work starts at home. That means we need everyone to heed the warnings of their local officials before, during, and after this storm. These are life-saving messages that simply cannot be ignored. And when it comes to hurricanes, water is dangerous, period. From coastal storm surge to inland flooding, the majority of the state of Florida is in Ian's crosshairs. Therefore, I would like to just share a few key safety messages that will help keep you and your family safe. First, never drive through standing or moving water, as it takes only a few inches of water to carry away a vehicle. Second, if you are taking shelter in an area with rising water levels, quickly find higher ground. And third, never operate a generator in your home. Too many lives are lost each year due to carbon monoxide poisoning, and it's incredibly important that you only run generators outdoors. So now I'll give a brief operational update on the interagency personnel, commodities, and resources that we have deployed to support this response. As I said yesterday, search and rescue remains a top priority. Our search and rescue coordination teams remain staged in Miami to include teams from our FEMA Urban Search and Rescue Program, the Coast Guard, CBP, the Department of Defense, the Department of the Interior, and the state of Florida. These teams will coordinate search and rescue efforts by land, air, and sea. We have 128,000 gallons of fuel remained ready for rapid deployment. We have moved in a variety of generators of all sizes and types to restore power to critical infrastructure and medical facilities as needed. The Army Corps of Engineers is pre-staging 350 personnel to conduct power and fuel assessments as soon as the storm passes. And just yesterday, I spoke with the president and CEO of the American Public Power Association to discuss some of their emergency preparedness actions and the mutual aid agreements that they have in place. We have 3.7 million meals and 3.5 million liters of water staged in Alabama, and there are multiple volunteer agencies that are staged and prepared to perform feeding operations as soon as it is safe to do so. We have provided Florida with 300 ambulances as well as expert federal medical teams. These are the same teams, the same brave first responders that we use to help communities during COVID-19. We are also tracking medical needs across Florida's hospitals, adult care facilities, and dialysis centers, both for facilities that have evacuated, but more importantly for those that have not. And finally, as I told the president yesterday, this level of interagency coordination will not stop as we prepare for the historic and the catastrophic impacts that we are already beginning to see. So now with every emergency response, we would not be successful in meeting our mission without our partners at the American Red Cross. The Red Cross has done an incredible amount of work in preparation for Hurricane Ian, and it is my pleasure to welcome the American Red Cross CEO, Gail Mcgovern.
Thank you so much, Administrator Criswell, for inviting me to join you. FEMA and the Weather Service are wonderful partners, and I want to thank you both. On behalf of the American Red Cross, our hearts are with everyone that's in the path of Hurricane Ian. Please listen to your local officials, evacuate if they tell you to do so, grab your medication, your glasses, your important documents, prescription drugs, and the like. Check on your neighbors, and please don't wait out the storm if you're being told to evacuate. It's dangerous. We're working closely with our partners and local officials in the affected communities to make sure they have the help that they need. Since last week, the American Red Cross has been moving hundreds of trained volunteers from across the country and tens of thousands of relief supplies to Florida in preparation for Ian. Everyone's safety is our top concern. We have dedicated and very compassionate teams of experienced Red Cross leaders in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. They're in contact with state, local, and tribal officials, and we will be ready to support the evacuation centers. As of this morning, staged in Florida, we have nearly 500 Red Cross responders and shelter supplies for 60,000 people. Those Red Cross teams have been responding to the requests from local government to equip and open evacuation centers, and they're preparing now to deliver critical relief after the hurricane passes. After landfall, by the end of this weekend, over 2,500 Red Cross responders will be deployed to Florida and other affected states. We'll work with our government and nonprofit partners and provide shelter, food, emergency supplies, care, comfort, and hope to the tens of thousands of people in the path of the hurricane. Also, if people want to help their neighbors, we can always use local volunteers. Just go to our website, redcross.org, and there are a lot of ways to find where there are safe shelters. Anyone who needs a safe place can go to find information for open Red Cross shelters at our website, redcross.org, or you can use our free Red Cross emergency app, and you can call 1-800-RED-CROSS. Just make sure you're following the instructions of the officials. And you can also find shelters at floridadisaster.org. And finally, to everyone in the path of the storm, please, please, please follow the evacuation instructions from your elected officials and your local officials. We know that for many of you, recovery from Hurricane Ian will likely be a very long road, and your American Red Cross will be there. And if you'd like to help us, you can volunteer, you can donate blood, or you can make a financial donation by going to redcross.org. And no donation is too small. They're all deeply appreciated, and everything that the Red Cross does is because of the generosity of the American public. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gail. Now I'd like to turn to Director Graham from the National Weather Service to talk about what he's doing to support the response.
Thank you, Administrator Criswell. Appreciate that. And, we're watching the storm closely. Of course, it's a very historic storm as we look at this. So I just appreciate the relationship and the coordination with FEMA and also the state, the county, the local, and also the federal level, all the emergency managers. So there's been coordination, briefings behind the scenes, talking about this storm for the last week, and we just appreciate that relationship. I actually literally have my phone up here because things keep changing as we speak with a storm like this. It's very common, so I'll be able to bring you the latest information right up here. Well, I wish this wasn't a forecast that I had to deliver. You really look at this, I wish this wasn't a forecast that's about to come true. Okay, so this is a devastating storm for parts of Florida, not just on the southwest coast, but also inland associated with some of these impacts. This is going to be a storm we talk about for many years to come. It's a historic event. So the impacts are already underway. Already starting to see some of those squalls getting into Florida, and we're throwing everything at it at NOAA. everything from the satellites, radar. We've had extra balloon releases across the country. Think about the Midwest. Think about the Northwest United States, the Weather Service Forecast Office launching extra balloons so we get that data into the models to try to get everything we can into the models to make these forecasts. Hurricane hunters from the Air Force and NOAA have constantly been in the storm, often at the same time, getting us the data that we need. And some of these updates that we've been giving you this morning has come from the data that we get from the hurricane hunters. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, I just want to say this real clear, what heroes, right? They go in towards the storm so we can get everybody away from the storm. So just real heroes flying into there, both the NOAA hurricane hunters and the Air Force hurricane hunters. Just absolutely amazing work from these heroes. Winds are 155 miles an hour. Category 4 storm. The radii, hurricane force winds go out 35 miles from the center. It's so important not to just focus on that center line, right? It's big. 35 miles away from the center, you have those hurricane force winds. Think about this, 150 miles away from the center, you have tropical storm force winds. So it's not just right there in the center, right? It's a bigger impact from all of this. And the storm is slowing down as forecast. And that's going to compound the issues associated with storm surge and compound the issues associated with the rainfall. So real important, you heard the advice already here, have those plans in place. If you're in Southwest Florida, you know, the time is to be safe and be where you are, and other places, you know, the central part of the state and the Northwest, this isn't just the West Coast, even the East Coast of Florida is going to see some storm surge and some winds as this takes the time to move across the state. Slow. So it's going to take 24 hours or so once it makes landfall to make it to the other side of the state across the peninsula. So it's 24 hours of rainfall, 24 hours of winds pushing the water. That's 24 hours that you'll see some impacts associated with this. We already heard it, Administrator Criswell, we've talked about this for years, and it's true. Water. We have to talk about the water. 90% of your fatalities in these tropical systems comes from the water. It's a storm surge, it's the rain, not just on the coast, but also inland. So we have to talk about it. Life-threatening, devastating storm surge forecast. Okay, this is the brand new information over the last hour or so. Think about some of these values. Middle Longboat to Inglewood, 6 to 10 feet. Inglewood to Bonita Beach, 12 to 18 feet storm surge. That's above ground. That's up your pant leg. That's a lot of water. It's a dangerous, life-threatening amount of storm surge, okay? Bonita Beach to Chokoloskee, 8 to 12 foot of storm surge. So these communities along the coast, it's an incredibly dangerous situation. Rainfall, not just along the coast, but inland. Think about these values that we're forecasting. Widespread 10 to 15 inches, 15 to 20 inches. Some places going to get 2 feet of rain. It's moving that slow. And that rain has a tough time draining because the storm surge has it blocked. So the water. People really need to listen to the warnings, have multiple ways to get information and warnings, as the water is going to be incredibly dangerous. The wind as well. And we talk about the leading cause of fatalities being water, but when you have a Category 4 storm like this around that eye wall, devastating amount of damage right around that eye wall. So structural damage, power lines, trees, and some serious damage right around that eye wall. And tornadoes. If there wasn't enough threats, we still have tornadoes. 90% of your tornadoes are on that right front quadrant. So as we follow this storm in, the right front quadrant's where you get 90% of the tornadoes. So everybody really urging you to stand by for some of those warnings as they get issued. So that's it. There's an incredible amount of information. It's coming. And the one last thing I want to mention, even getting through the storm, it's dangerous afterwards. It's no fun after these storms, okay? There's debris. There's, you know, you think about trees, power lines, and please be careful with the generators. We've seen over the last couple of years in some of these big hurricanes, including Hurricane Laura that hit Louisiana, that there were more fatalities afterwards associated with generators than there was from a similar storm surge of 16 to 18 feet. So I'm just urging everyone, please follow those instructions and really be careful after the fact. So anyway, that's all I have. Administrator Criswell, you know, I just appreciate the partnership. We're all in this together. We're all trying to make the country weather and climate ready, and together we're able to do it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. General Llargues with the
Thank you.
update recap.
Thank you. Hola, muy buenos días. Soy Daniel Llargues, portavoz nacional de FEMA. Voy a hacer una actualización de lo que dijo la administradora Criswell. El huracán continúa siendo una amenaza peligrosa para la vida en los próximos días. los residentes del estado de Florida, en las partes de la costa, ya empezaron a sentir estos embates del huracán Ian y todavía no toca tierra. Entonces, queremos que tengan mucha precaución. La administradora platicó con su equipo, con el equipo de FEMA esta mañana, y estamos listos y confiados de que tenemos a los equipos correctos en los lugares correctos para responder a esta tormenta. Y también para satisfacer las necesidades de las personas a las que servimos. Les pedimos a todos que acaten las advertencias de las autoridades locales antes, durante y después de la tormenta. Estas son advertencias que amenazan la vida y no pueden ser ignoradas de ninguna forma. Cuando se trata de olas de agua, lo escuchamos de la administradora, es algo bien, pero bien peligroso. Tienen que tener mucha, mucha precaución. Estamos hablando de marejada ciclónica, también de inundaciones que no tan solo van a estar en la costa, pero también tierra adentro, y eso va a afectar a comunidades que están tierra adentro en el estado de Florida. La administradora Criswell también mencionó que queremos compartir consejos útiles con ustedes. Nunca maneje en aguas inundadas. También si está en un refugio y empieza a inundarse, por favor vaya a un lugar más alto de ese refugio. Y tercero, nunca use un generador dentro de su casa. Es peligroso, es letal. Hemos visto en otras tormentas que eso no es una buena idea. También una actualización de las operaciones de FEMA, de nuestro personal, de los suministros y los recursos que hemos desplazado en la respuesta a esta emergencia. Tenemos equipos de búsqueda y rescate, también de equipos de la Guardia Costera de Estados Unidos, Departamento de Defensa, Departamento de Interior y del estado de Florida, localizados y ubicados en Miami, listos para ser desplazados como se necesiten. Estos equipos coordinan sus operaciones por aire, por agua y también por tierra. Tenemos 128,000 galones de combustible también ya listos para ser desplazados a las áreas que sean necesitadas. Hemos movilizado generadores de todo tipo y todo tamaño también para restaurar energía eléctrica en esos lugares, en esos centros de infraestructura crítica como hospitales y lugares médicos también. El cuerpo de ingenieros también ha preposicionado 350 empleados para ayudar y llevar a cabo evaluaciones de energía y de combustible cuando la tormenta ya pase. La administradora habló recientemente también con la compañía de electricidad para ver cómo están ellos posicionados para restaurar la energía eléctrica. En cuanto a agua, comida y esos suministros, tenemos 3.7 millones de alimentos ya preposicionados en Alabama, también 3.5 millones de agua, también en ese estado preposicionados para ser desplazados a la zona impactada. Y hay muchas agencias también sin fines de lucro que están ayudando en las labores de alimentación para las personas afectadas después de que pase la tormenta. También en Florida tenemos 300 ambulancias y equipos médicos federales, los cuales también apoyaron en la respuesta a COVID-19 cuando esa emergencia pasó. Estamos vigilando muy de cerca las necesidades de hospitales del estado de Florida, centros de cuidado de adultos mayores y de diálisis también, y aquellos lugares que no evacuaron o que no pudieron desalojar. Finalmente, la administradora Criswell habló ayer con el presidente Biden y le dijo que nuestra coordinación multiagencial continúa y no va a parar. Esa coordinación no para ante esta histórica tormenta y catastrófica tormenta que ha pasado, y como lo dijo la administradora también, estos esfuerzos de FEMA no pueden ser posibles si no tenemos el apoyo y la coordinación de todas las agencias federales y organizaciones sin fines de lucro como la Cruz Roja. Eso es todo. Gracias. Administrator, thank you.
Thank you. We'll take some questions now.
Thanks. I'm Alice with ABC News. First, we've seen some very specific requests from Governor DeSantis, certain gear, certain equipment. At this point, do you feel like the federal government has been able to get everything that he has asked for, or is there still some equipment you're trying to get in place? And then secondly, any update on how the evacuations are going? Is there a sense of timing when people might need to think today it's just too late to leave?
Yeah, let me start with the evacuation question. I've listened to some of Governor DeSantis's briefings this morning, and I think, again, the point is listen to your local officials. I think there's parts where they need to start staying in place, right? That it's too late to evacuate, but they need to listen to what their local officials are telling them. But as we see this storm, it's going to continue to move across the state, and so there may be parts where it's still safe to evacuate. So it's hard to make a general statement on that. It's really important that they're listening to their local officials because they're doing what they can to make sure that they're keeping them safe. But they need to make plans for that too, right? If they are going to stay in place, know how they're going to communicate with their family so they can let them know if they're safe or what their needs are going to be. And that's why we've put together this really strong search and rescue capability to make sure that we can go in by air, land, and sea, because we know that there's going to be people that have been impacted, isolated, and are going to need rescue. First part of your question again?
About whether you're still positioned.
Right, yep. So we are continuing to move in equipment as the governor asks for more equipment. I believe today he asked for more high water vehicles and additional rescue capabilities, and we are moving that in. We are going to continue to move equipment in as we see where the impacts of the storm are as well. We've pre-positioned quite a bit of equipment so we can respond immediately. Once we know what the impacts are and what the additional needs are, we're just going to continue moving that equipment in. But I think that we are positioned really well to meet those immediate needs in the first few hours, and once we know impacts and what else is needed, we'll just continue to move that in. Anybody else?
Right here, ma'am.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Karina Kopp with the Outdoor Spectrum News. I just had a question for Director Graham. We are seeing some reports of water receding in the Tampa Bay area. Can you explain, why that's happening?
A lot of you are familiar. I think for the last 10 years I've said this, little wiggles matter. And these little small changes make a difference whether the water is pushed in from storm surge or literally blown out. So when you have strong winds with a storm like this, it could actually push the water out. But here's the very important thing. So don't go out there, right? So it's so dangerous to be out there. So even if you see the water receding, it's not the time to go out there and look at it or collect shells or whatever it is. We've seen this in these type of storms. When the winds come down, when the winds decrease, that water comes back in. It could be incredibly dangerous. So yes, I've seen some of the pictures, and that can happen in these storms. That's the power of the wind and where it can push the water. Yep.
Thank you so much for doing this. I have a question for Administrator Criswell and a question for Director Graham, if that's okay. Administrator Criswell, how many FEMA personnel are in place in Florida? And Florida's home to an older population. We can all remember the image of nursing home residents during Harvey trapped in floodwater. Can you speak to any special considerations for senior citizens sheltering in place, as well as some of that coordination with nursing homes and senior living?
Yeah, absolutely. We have hundreds of personnel in the state already, embedded in the State Emergency Management Center, as well as staged in places like Miami, as well as in Orlando and other parts. But we also have personnel that are staged in Atlanta, Georgia, at our regional office that are ready to move in. As the storm passes and we see where the needs are, we are just going to continue to move people in. That number is going to rise significantly over the following days, and to make sure that we have the resources in place to support the people that have the needs. I know that this, I believe, I was talking with Gail, 30% of the population is over the age of 60 in many of these impacted areas. We know that that's going to be a significant concern. When I talked to Governor DeSantis on Friday and asked him what his concerns were, that was one of his concerns. I think that's why we've put in place this really robust search and rescue capability across the federal government to complement the amazing efforts that the state already has in place through their own urban search and rescue teams and the National Guard, because we know we're going to have to get out there and check and make sure that everybody is okay. That is our first priority, and that's why we have this multi-agency, federal, state, local effort in place to make sure that they are mapping out where they're going to be able to go. When I talked to our Deputy Federal Coordinating Officer this morning, what he told me is that these teams are going to be assigned directly to local jurisdictions, right? So they can put them and assign them to go search places where they know that their need is, and that way we're not having any gaps in the efforts that we're doing.
For Director Graham, you called this storm historic. How does this storm compare with previous historic storms, Andrew, Irma, Michael? Can you speak a little bit more to what makes this maybe similar or distinct to some of the storms we've seen?
The first comment I always try to make is they're all so different. Every storm is so different, and it's just an urgent plea to everybody listening: don't compare storms. So there's similarities when you see, storms about the storm surge. Hurricane Laura, we saw 18 feet of storm surge. It was devastating. It houses off the foundation. So you can use generalizations like that to think about the kind of damage that could occur. But teeny changes in the storm, bigger, smaller, left, right, faster, slower, these really subtle changes can make a huge difference in what you see on the ground. So really what we say is think about those impacts. Think about what does 20 inches of rain look like. And we try to paint that picture. That's an incredible amount. So we say 2 feet type of thing to think about that. Storm surge, I'm 6'5". And you think about this storm surge forecast, you start getting 15, 16, 17, 18 feet. I mean, that's a lot of me type of thing. So we try to paint that picture to really, really key in those impacts. So, and the last comment is, that's why the whole NOAA team comes together on these storms, from the satellites, the radar, you look at the hurricane hunters of the Air Force and NOAA. It takes that entire team to really come up with those impacts. Not just the Hurricane Center, but the Weather Prediction Center, Storm Prediction Center, looking at where the tornadoes are going to be, the weather forecast offices, talking to the emergency managers constantly. I mean, literally in those situations, I've been in those situations, and you might as well just leave the phone on speaker, right? You're constantly talking about these. Look at me in a news conference. Look at my phone open, right? It's information comes in pretty quick. So that's what happens. So it's hard to compare storms, but you really can compare the impacts, and those values that I gave are just absolutely devastating. It's historic. Yeah.
Sir.
Hey there, Gary Grunback from NBC News here. I have a same question for the administrator and the director, so maybe I'll have different answers here. There's lots of moving parts. What is your biggest concern right now? What is keeping you up at night this week?
It's the water, right? I mean, we are talking about significant amount of storm surge and a significant amount of rainfall. I think one of the reports I even heard earlier today, in some parts of the state, up to 5 inches per hour of rainfall. You know, when you combine those two together, as you heard Director Graham say, it's going to flood. The storm surge is going to back up the rainfall, and it's going to create incredibly life-threatening, dangerous situations. So for those people who didn't evacuate and are now being asked to stay in place, they need to make sure that they're getting to high ground, right? And that they are putting themselves and their families in a position that is going to keep them safe. For those that are still being asked to evacuate, take them seriously. Evacuate and get out of harm's way. I think the other big concern I have is then once the storm passes and individuals go out into this water, the water is still dangerous, right? It's still going to be moving rapidly. It's still going to have debris in it. It's still going to have down power lines in it. So there's so many different dangers after the storm passes that also contribute to some of the indirect fatalities that we see after a storm. So people just need to stay focused. They need to listen to their officials. They need to understand what the threats and the dangers are. Those first few hours, days after the storm passes are just as dangerous as when the storm is going over.
So it's interesting when you do this enough years that we have it's the same concerns. It really is. It's interesting when I listen to Administrator Criswell, it's the same thing. So I worry about, people that are inland that think they're okay because they're away from the coast, and it's not true. Right, the storm surge pushes water into, so you have every canal and river that usually drains that rain, they're going to flow backward. The water gets pushed into these areas, flows backward, and then that rainfall has nowhere to drain. So even if you're inland, you have dangers associated with the water. So there's no safety there. So you have to really be in a situation that you're really safe. And it's the same thing afterwards. I worry about it so much, and it's all, you see it on every one of these storms. We get through the storm, and then afterwards, the hazards, the water, what's in the water. You think about power lines down, hazards, and you think about generator use. Please help us get that message out. Because every one of these storms, we lose so many people afterwards for improper generator use. I'm just begging everybody, please, if you don't know, ask. Right? There's instructions, there's information out there, and make sure they're well-ventilated areas away from your windows, not in the house. And if we could do that, we can save some lives. So help us get that message out. So it's the same thing.
Hi, Carmen Mesola with Telemundo Network. This question is for Mr. Daniel Llargues. If you can answer in Spanish.
Sure.
Para la gente que quizás no habla español, que esté ahorita en peligro en esa área, ¿qué debería de hacer? ¿A dónde debería referirse para pedir información en su idioma? Y también recordarle a la gente que a lo mejor tiene una situación migratoria difícil, el pedir ayuda, esto no implica nada, ¿cierto?
Lo más importante en estos momentos, Carla, es que las personas escuchen las indicaciones de las autoridades locales. Para recibir información en español, les recomiendo que descarguen la aplicación de FEMA, totalmente en español, para teléfonos Android y para teléfonos Apple. Y ahí pueden, dos cosas, recibir alertas de las condiciones del tiempo y también encontrar refugios si es que tienen que ir a un refugio cercano. En este momento, la recomendación es que se queden en su casa. Como dijo la administradora, una de las cosas que nos preocupa mucho para nosotros es el agua. El agua está creciendo, aumentando muy rápidamente. 5 pulgadas cada 10, 15 minutos, eso es mucho. Y todavía no toca tierra el huracán. Entonces, primeramente el mensaje es que estén seguros. Si pueden descargar la aplicación, reciban estas alertas de las condiciones del tiempo y también buscar un lugar seguro. Gracias.
All right, last call for questions.
As a follow-up, just about sort of the map and path looking ahead a few days out, right now, where in South Carolina, Georgia are you most worried? Is there a chance that this really weakens by then or gather strength? Like, what are you looking ahead to?
Yeah, I'll let Ken talk about that, but let me first say I did speak with the governors of Georgia and South Carolina a few days ago about their concerns. That was before we knew where the path of the storm was definitely going to go. I think the predictions are that they are going to experience some storm surge and some rain. Our Region 4 office, which is located in Atlanta, Georgia, they have been fully engaged with the staff in both Georgia and South Carolina. We've sent liaison officers there to integrate with them. And as they decide what their potential needs might be, we'll continue to move resources in that area as well. Ken, I don't know if you have anything else.
Yeah, you can see with the track on the board up here, so it's not just the west coast of Florida, it's also the east coast. So the wind field's so large, you'll actually get storm surge in portions of northeast Florida. So Jacksonville area, there's going to be water some pushed up into those areas. So even they need to really pay attention to this. And it goes over water for a little bit, but we don't expect some rapid intensification there, staying a tropical storm. But here's the thing, development or not, it's still a lot of moisture. So you'll see some storm surge values in Georgia into South Carolina, but the rain's got to go somewhere. And these are states that have some terrain, so you could see some flash flooding. So just anybody in these areas, just pay attention to that information. Have the latest forecast, because there could be some flash flooding up in those areas over the next few days.
All right, if there's no more questions, I would just like to say thank you to everybody for joining us here today, and thank you for helping us get the message out to people so they know what the threats are. We can make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep people safe. Thank you.